There's a lot of interest, but also a lot of darkness when looking at the UFO phenomenon. Not everyone that comes into contact with a UFO lives to tell the tale. And this episode is Death by UFO. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Mysteries with a History, where you'll be taken on a wild ride into the unknown, the strange, and the mysterious. Like you, I have questions, and like you, I want answers. And with each episode together, we will peel away the layers to look for the truth. If you enjoy stories, cases, or updates about UFOs or even the strange and mysterious, this is the place for you. So subscribe to the channel and podcast if you haven't already. For this episode, let me bring in my co-host, Jimmy Church of Faded Black Radio. Jimmy,
Hey,
happy Thursday.
ho. Tried to catch me by surprise, but I was ready to go today. I'm on my toes. I took a long, hello, everybody. Hi, Cristina. I took a long Harley ride today, longer than I normally do. I got back a little late, put me behind the ball. I didn't finish, but I'm fresh, man. I feel good. Beautiful day outside. I got stung yesterday by a wasp right here. And no, 2 days ago. My arms, it's like, man, am I allergic? Do I need to go to the doctor? I was really like having those paranoid thoughts. Okay, I got antibiotics. I'm on like, what's the website? WebMD, the wasp bite. Should I be concerned? And I'm better now. But today when I rode, Cristina, I suited up, face covered, but it was wasp free. Yeah, it was a wasp free ride. So I just kept going. But I'm here, I'm fresh, I'm ready to go. It's a beautiful day outside. And a great subject today. I don't know where this one is coming from. Death by UFO, right?
That's right. Well,
I always wonder. Now, just stop right there. I always wonder when you come up with these ideas, and some of them are, funner and crazier than others. But what are you doing? What rabbit hole did you trip over and fall into when you come at me with, okay, church, today it's death by UFO? It's like, what's going on, man? What's going on? So what's going on?
Well, this episode is alluding to a future episode that's going to be coming out hopefully next week. That is a pre-recorded show with a lot of B-roll and things like this. So that other case that I was researching led me this way. And so I think this is a great thing to cover with Jimmy Church. Let's talk about it together because there's actually a lot. I wouldn't say a lot, but there's a good handful of cases where people have had pretty detrimental effects and or death when in like having an encounter with the UFO. And yes, we're familiar with a handful of them, but today we're going to be covering a few that people know of and a few that people don't. So I think we should start off in a timely order, going off with the first one about Thomas P. Mantell back in 1948. And I'm going to share my screen here so we can get started on that. But Jimmy, while I do that, walk us through this case.
This case, one of my favorite cases. Okay, so let me back up here. Okay, so this case, when and it's been depicted, it's been in movies, it's been in video games, TV series, and different takes on it. And we have 2 or 3 official versions of the case, and we have some of the conspiracy theories behind it. So I'm going to start here. Let's just go with the facts of the case. The facts of the case, the front end of it. January 7th, 1948, 25-year-old Captain Thomas Mantell, a Kentucky Air National Guard pilot, died when he crashed his P-51 Mustang fighter plane near Franklin, Kentucky, United States, after being sent in pursuit of an unidentified flying object, or a UFO. That's what was told to him and his squadron. They were already in the air. They were doing their thing. And they got notified by this. Godman Army Airfield at Fort Knox, Kentucky, received a report from the Kentucky Highway Patrol of an unusual aerial object near Madisonville, which could not be immediately identified. Again, these are the facts of the case. 4 P-51D Mustangs of Sea Flight, his squadron, 165th Fighter Squadron, Kentucky Air National Guard, one piloted by Mantell, were told to approach the object. All right. Now, and I'm going to turn this over to you in a second, because this is where things get pretty crazy. There are different versions of the story from an official standpoint. Okay, so I'm going to stay in the fact side of this. So we've got 4 P-51Ds. He's in one. The first official reports came out that you need oxygen to fly above a certain altitude, around 20,000 feet, 15,000 feet. It gets a little wonky. 20,000 feet, you're in danger zone. Okay. He's 25 years old. He's in good health. But the first official version of this is that 3 of the other planes bailed out, no oxygen, and he continued his pursuit. The radio transmissions, which I'll get into in a second, were pretty interesting. The 3 pilots bailed out because they didn't have oxygen. He didn't have oxygen either, Cristina. And so he continues up. But it turns out, now I'm just going to back up, that 2 of the planes had bailed out. One continued with him, and that is pretty interesting. His last radio transmission was, "I'm closing in to take a good look." Okay. Now, his previous radio transmissions were, "I can see it. It's in front of me. It's moving at my speed. It's moving away from me. I can see it. It's large. It's metallic." Another radio transmission was, "I'm getting closer to it. It's slowing down," and so forth. Now, the first explanation, which is very interesting, and this was out there for quite a while, that he was chasing the planet Venus. All right. Now, when we think about just that for a second, and I'm just going to spend a minute here, you would think that a pilot, a captain, knows the difference between a planet, and in this case, Venus, in the middle of the day, and something else. He had always described it as large and metallic. I don't know how you would ever mistake Venus for being metallic. Okay, so there's that. And then the other research that came out later, where Venus was in the horizon, the weather conditions that were there, the clouds that would be in play, would all have either blocked out Venus, or in the middle of the day, you wouldn't have seen Venus at all. 4 years later, that was in 1948. 4 years later, Project Blue Book, Cristina, said it was a skyhook balloon. Dun, dun, dun. Right? Here we go. Right? The balloon thing. Now this is where I'm going to just reveal a bunch of stuff. After disappearing, Mantell's plane crashed into the yard of Mrs. Carrie Phillips, who lived on Lake Spring Road, about 5 miles southwest of Franklin, Kentucky, on the W.J. Phillips farm. There is no record of what happened that caused Mantell's plane to come down. The Flight Service Center contacted police officer Joe Walker in Franklin, who wrote up his report and had taken charge of the crash site. He reported that when he arrived, Mantell's body was not in the plane. Okay? That's strange. Eyewitnesses told the officer that they had seen the plane coming down nose first in a steep dive and that the plane had either exploded or disintegrated in the air before striking the ground. The craft did not burn up or did not catch on fire after impact, and the wreckage was spread out for over a mile. A bunch of crucial parts to the airplane, including the propeller, by the way, were never found, were never located. Now we have the rumors around the incident. We have one, it was a spacecraft, it was a UFO, and it shot down Mantell's plane when he got too close. We have that. Number two, we have Captain Mantell's body was found riddled with bullets. Okay. Three, his body was missing. It was later found, by the way, but it was not in his aircraft and it was not in his seat. Did he try to eject? Which is strange because he would have been unconscious from the lack of oxygen and so forth. There are also rumors that the aircraft completely disintegrated in the air way before the impact, possibly being shot. There was also rumors that the wreckage was radioactive. There were rumors that his body was wounded by a mysterious ray. There is also stories that there were unexplained tiny holes found in the wrecked aircraft. Now, all of this and much of this was secreted away. We never really got a good look at the aircraft, the wreckage, what was left, his body. We only have the newspaper reports. We have the police officer's report, and then we have what was written up in the news. This is a very famous case, truly death by UFO.
It's a very significant one. And what's interesting is actually to hear all of these potential rumors that are connected to this case that we don't always hear too often. And while in many respects, rumors might have no basis, in other ways, I feel like we can kind of digest that and think about it and consider all the possibilities because we don't actually know what happened. And Anderson, thank you so much for the 100 knock. It says, "Hi from Norway. Love your show." And Henry, thank you for the $20. It says, "Much respect for your content and the work you do." Thank you for that. The things that you guys are doing, supporting the channel, that is the best way to do it. And also by just liking the show as well. That really helps. Also, I wanted to mention here that Zenza Bill says the P-51 had no ejection seat. You open the canopy and jump, which is pretty freaky. Along with that, Mantell did have 2,867 flight hours, much of it in combat. So that demonstrates that he had a very keen eye on
He was a
knowing how
seasoned
to
veteran.
identify things.
Yeah, he was a seasoned veteran, 25 years old, but back then, 25, and you're racking up hours, not only in combat, but so forth. You are a veteran pilot, and you know what's going on. The other thing is, Christina, I know I just interrupted you. These guys, seriously, daredevils. They have a level of courage that you and I will never experience in our lives. Right. And so what's he think? Man, I'm going after this thing. Right. And that no fear. And he was in pursuit. And he was seeing something that he wanted to chase down. One other quick note, then I'll hand it back to you because I rudely interrupted. It was later reported, and I always found this very interesting, that at that time, but this came out years later, but at that time, supposedly on that day, and the sightings were reported from different cities and airports in the area of this object in the sky, that an astronomer at a school had a telescope and looked at it and reported back that it was a balloon, that he had clearly saw it. But that didn't get published and reported on for years. If that was the case, why wasn't it reported on that day? Why wasn't it in the newspaper? Why wasn't it part of the police report? Why wasn't it part of the official Air Force explanation of this? And remember, this wasn't the Army Air Force. This was the U.S. Air Force, which was formed 1 year before in 1947. Okay, I interrupted you. You were saying?
He also mentioned that when he was observing this object, that it looked metallic and it had this tremendous size. And he was constantly relaying this over the radio to the control tower. And Jimmy had also paraphrased a few other things that he had mentioned as well. But what's really interesting here, and very much like David Fravor when attempting to follow the tic tac, is that level of ambition to see if they can actually meet the same speed, seeing if they're actually able to, quote, catch this object and try to understand with their own eyeballs what they're looking at. So he went about 25,000 feet up into the air, attempting to keep up with this object, but it ended up not very well. Just put it like that, because he did perish soon after. And then it was buried for a certain period of time. And then, as Jimmy.
You okay?
Yeah.
All right,
I'm okay.
I'll jump in. Let me say this. The P-51D had a top speed of 487 miles per hour. This propeller wasn't a jet, but it was one of the fastest planes in the world at that time. And he could not catch it. So if it was a skyhook balloon, and you had just said, he described, and others from the ground had all said that the object was between 250 and 300 feet in diameter. Now, call me skeptical. You can say what you want, but a balloon in the wind traveling faster than remember, he never caught it. He couldn't catch up to it. Traveling at 500 miles per hour in the wind. There was 500-mile-per-hour winds up there for this balloon, a balloon that is reportedly 300 feet in diameter. By the way, the skyhooks were not that big, but that's what everybody else from the ground and Mantell himself described its size as being. He could never catch it, flying at over 400 miles per hour. It's a very interesting part of this case, and it's one that makes you just want to go, okay, what's really going on here? You're muted.
Thanks. And that would lead us into our next case, talking about, and Ora's going to briefly cover this one, is being, here's a newspaper clipping, is being Colares, Brazil, but only a specific section of this case. So as many people know right here on this channel, it is one of my all-time favorite cases, and I will find any excuse to talk about it just because there's so much to it. And then in one chapter in the book Imminent by Lou Elizondo, that's when it really caught traction. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, never heard of this case. And I'm like, come to the channel. We've covered it a handful of times, and I've done full-blown analysis on it. But today, we're covering just a very specific section of this incident back in 1977 in Brazil, because according to the local doctor there, she had mentioned that she had two patients, two of them, that were supposedly like this beam of light went over on top of them. They were completely paralyzed. They ended up going in almost the state of rigor mortis when they entered the clinic, being brought in by their friends and family. And it was so severe, she wasn't able to do anything. They had to be practically shipped to the nearby hospital that had better equipment and better understanding of this. Well, as they were in that, quote, other hospital, both of them passed away. And when the doctor in Colares attempted to receive the paperwork onto the cause of death, what was the reasoning, it became classified information. And this is a very, very complex, very interesting case. And if you are not familiar with it, just type in Colares, Brazil right here on YouTube or on any podcast, and you will find it in detail. But this is something that we don't hear significantly often. I mean, today we'll be covering it at length, but to have a beam of light placed on top of you, you go into the state of paralysis, which we've heard before, but it was so significant for these two specific people that their bodies were completely stiff. It was so stiff that, according to the story from the doctor, she had mentioned that they weren't even able to enter the car. None of their arms or legs could be bent to be placed into the car to be taken to the hospital. And so they had to have like windows open, doors slightly open in order to place these bodies in the vehicle. And it's just there are a lot of other symptoms that have taken place during that case. So one of them being puncture wounds in the chest and thigh area, along with other instances of paralysis. But many of these people were able to get out of them once that beam of light had moved away. And when the military came in, the Brazilian military went over to Colares to attempt and investigate the incident, which ended up being called Operação Plato. They realized that it was so much more than what they labeled it, which was mass hysteria. They went over to the clinic and they told the doctor, you're going to be telling all of your patients that what they're experiencing is mass hysteria. It's not aliens, it's not UFOs, it's nothing out of this world. It's incredibly mundane. But because she had her own experience right before the military had barged into her clinic, she said, I cannot lie to my patients like that. And supposedly she gave an interview decades later where she stated that she was actually documenting all of this. Every one of her patients that she was speaking to, she was writing it down on paper to get a better understanding of the case. But once the military had arrived, she burnt all of that paperwork, and now it's only all we have is her memory and the interview that she gave where she was relaying that information. But this is why this particular case is just one of my favorites, definitely in the top 5, just because we are dealing with such hostile entities, more so than I think in any other story that we've come across or any other part of the world. Brazil has had its handful of very strange and interesting cases, and it's just truly remarkable.
Would you call this, this show is Death by UFO? So would you say that this was intentional, right? Was this a hostile act, or you know what I mean? Or was it just an accident? That whatever the craft was that projected this beam of light. And I know that we've covered this story a lot, and it's an amazing case. But were they attacking the village? Were they attacking people, or were they just on a science and research mission, and they didn't intend to hurt anybody?
Based off of the witness testimonies that we have, which are in the hundreds, even though according to Operação Plata, they collected a few thousand witness reports, it seems like these craft, because none of them really saw the entities minus the captain of Operação Plata Orange Lima, it seems like these craft are very hostile or are cold-blooded indifference kind of way. And it seems as if they saw the people there as lab rats. Now, could the craft have been AI operated? Were they just probes running an experiment when we're not really dealing with any biological entities here? I think that's a question that has been posed rather recently, but it just seems like they didn't care about the people there, and they were just what seems like running tests, so much so that the people in Colares and other surrounding towns, they nicknamed these craft Chupa Chupa or Sucker Sucker because they believed that these puncture wounds were taking blood from them and into this craft.
They they lived in fear. That's and you and I have talked about this case so many times, and I can't imagine, especially as being a parent, what it must have been like knowing that you couldn't go out on the streets, right? At night, that place was locked down and everybody was in fear and they thought that their homes were safe. And it turned out that that wasn't the case either. I can't imagine that kind of fear. And the army shows up and they don't do anything. And it took a while for that to happen too, as well. That was an instant, and it didn't really solve the issue. I can't imagine living in that kind of fear. Yeah, it's a crazy case and it's an amazing case. I'm not sure. Again, I just don't want to come off as naive, but I'm not sure if it was a hostile act, right? We would have something else to go on there, that just maybe it was just a science thing. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I don't want to go into the, a hostile, malevolent side of things. I'm just not sure about that. But if you're a lab rat or something in a lab that's being tested on, you might, if you're the lab rat, you're thinking it's a hostile act, right? So I get that. I get that part of it. I don't want to come across as naive. You want to move on to our next case?
Yeah, definitely. But before we do, it's very difficult to just rationalize what these craft and or entities are doing as well. That we don't know their motive. And then even up until today, in 2024, we still have no idea what those craft were doing in Colares, Brazil, why they were practically harassing the fishermen there, what was going on. And we haven't really seen a similar case since in some ways. Now, I do want to mention that ufologist Ronnie Vernet, Brazilian ufologist, did mention a similar case in the early 2000s. I think it was 2011 or 2016. I had him on not too long ago, and he mentioned that this indigenous tribe had encountered something very, very similar. But again, it's in Brazil. No other part in the world have we come across that case. Only in Brazil, 30 plus years later. Why? What is going on there? And how come it's only happened twice to our understanding and our research so far? Steve, thank you so much for the $5. It says, thank you for the great video. Appreciate the hard work. I appreciate you in catching this live. Thank you for that. Let's move on to our next case, Jimmy. And that is what?
Well, okay. I want to hear your take, because I want to do dogs, and I want to hear your side of Maury Island and the death of a dog. Now, so I'm going to leave it right there, because this case is one of the craziest cases in all of ufology, and I will let everybody know why. But let's go to Maury Island, 1947. We've got lots of things happening, right? We've got Kenneth Arnold. We've got Roswell. We've got the Rhodes photographs in Phoenix, Arizona. Lots of crazy things went down in the year of 1947. Kicking off with Maury Island. What happened?
I'm going to give the sped up version for this one, really focusing on the dog here, because this particular case, Harold Dahl, two people working for him on the boat, his son and his dog, were all casually minding their own business until they saw several donut-shaped UFOs in the sky. And it seems like they were dropping this very hot molten debris coming right out of this craft, hitting the water, hitting the boat, hitting Harold's son, broke his arm, and killed the dog. It's already sad. Well, this is very interesting. I know, like, it's just.
Yeah.
So obviously,
whenever somebody mentions a dog in a movie, in a sentence, it's got a sad ending. It always
The little
does.
sting to it.
Yeah, it does. It does. It does. Okay, continue.
This particular case was just right before Roswell. People at this time didn't have a super keen interest in UFOs. People didn't really talk about it as much either, but this case has everything. It has UFOs, it has witnesses, it has debris, and it has the men in black as well. And as soon as this incident took place, Harold Dahl attempted to collect some of this debris, kept it in his home. He's like, this is insane. I got to keep this. It hurt my son. It killed my dog. It ruined my boat. There's got to be something to this. Soon after, just the next day, he gets a knock on the door. Guess who it was? It was the men in black.
Okay. That's where I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in right there. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Everybody, I want you to just sit and listen and take some notes. This is where this case, Roswell, put it to the side. Rendlesham, put it to the side. Malmstrom, put it to the side. Phoenix Lights, put it to the side. This case gets nuts. Okay? All right. So let's start with Harold Dahl. Harold Dahl originally reported, and I quote, on June 21st, 1947, in the afternoon, about 2 o'clock, I was patrolling the East Bay of Maury Island. I, as captain, was steering my patrol boat close to the shore of a bay on Maury Island. On board were 2 crewmen, my 15-year-old son, and his dog. As I looked up from the wheel on my boat, I noticed 6 very large, donut-shaped aircraft. One of the objects began spewing forth what seemed like thousands of newspapers from somewhere on the inside of its center. These newspapers turned out to be a white type of very lightweight metal, and they fluttered to earth. Now, according to Dahl, a substance resembling lava rocks fell onto their boat, breaking a worker's arm and killing his dog. Now, this is where it really gets crazy. Enter Fred Chrisman. Write the name down. Fred Chrisman has been involved in every conspiracy from UFOs in the 40s all the way to the JFK assassination. All right. He was a deep cover CIA special investigator. How crazy is this? In 1968, Chrisman, remember, talking about Maury Island and a UFO case. In 1968, Chrisman was subpoenaed by the New Orleans grand jury in the prosecution of a local man for the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, a prosecution that would later be dramatized in the 1991 Oliver Stone film JFK. That's right. Fred Chrisman from Maury Island and Harold Dahl all the way to the JFK assassination. Fred Chrisman's name, if you go, and it's a fun thing to do, I suggest everybody go and do it. Look up the name Fred Chrisman and just check out any crazy conspiracy story from 1940 to 1970. Fred Chrisman is involved. I'm talking about the FBI, the CIA, local law enforcement, the military. It's absolutely nuts how Fred Chrisman was at the right place at the right time throughout history. It involves the space program and UFOs all the way to the 1960s. It's crazy. All right. Chrisman shows up. And he showed the white metal debris to Kenneth Arnold. Kenneth Arnold, who is responsible for the term flying saucer. It was Kenneth Arnold, as we all know, that saw the 9 UFOs above Mount Rainier in 1947, a couple of weeks before Roswell, and brought the official side of ET and UFOs and flying saucers visiting this Earth into mass media. That Kenneth Arnold. Now, he's involved in this story. So Fred Chrisman, CIA agent, brings in Kenneth Arnold. Kenneth Arnold is shown this white metal debris. Kenneth Arnold, then decided to contact Lieutenant Frank Brown of Military Intelligence from the 4th Air Force, Hamilton Field in California. Brown arrived up in Tacoma, Maury Island, where all of this is going down, and arrived at Arnold's Hotel in Tacoma along with Captain William L. Davidson. Now, the strange thing is, when Arnold shows up in Tacoma, he's already got a hotel room booked in his name. He didn't tell anybody what was going on. And he was surprised to have a hotel booked in his name and wondered what was going on. Okay, so he checks into the hotel. Brown and Davidson conducted interviews with everybody. Harold Dahl and Arnold is involved because he saw the boxes of the lava rock. Something that was dropped from these aircraft that killed the dog and broke his crewman's arm. All right. So he's a witness to this. They interview Harold Dahl. They collected fragments. And while all of this is going on, Dahl, Chrisman, Brown, and Arnold started to find out through their conversations that somebody was listening to them, both on the phone and in the private conversations that they were having in this hotel. In multiple occasions, there were just two people in a room having a conversation. Third person gets involved. The conversation that they had private is now being discussed with a third party. But there was 4 of them. They never figured out who was doing the listening because each person was with somebody else. So they could never pin it on one person. They ended up tearing the hotel rooms apart, looking for microphones. They were stopped talking on the phones because they thought that the phones were bugged. Nobody could figure out that part of it. And then it gets crazier. Davidson and Brown, after conducting the interviews, they collected all of the fragments, and then they started to look, and then Arnold and Chrisman then noticed that the fragments that were in these boxes weren't the same ones that Harold Dahl collected from his boat. They had been replaced, and that includes the light metal, the white metal that was described as newspaper. Remember, it was fluttering down. That debris was changed. It wasn't the same. The rocks, always described as lava-like stuff, was now different from the original box that Harold Dahl had, and they all saw it. All right? Now, they were given parts of this. They exchanged stuff, right? The replaced stuff. They got to keep some of that. And I'm talking about Chrisman, and I'm talking about Harold Dahl and Kenneth Arnold. You know what happened next? The original debris from the boat was placed on a plane, and they prepared for a return flight to California out of McCord Field in Tacoma. You can look up McCord Field right now on Google Maps. It's right there. And then in the early hours of August 1st, The B-25 Mitchell, the two officers were piloting, crashed outside of Kelso, Washington, killing them both, and the UFO debris disappeared.
Dun, dun,
It's one of the
dun.
it's one of the craziest cases. So I let you start off with the dog. I let you lead into the Men in Black. It all revolves around this guy, Fred Chrisman. It's absolutely nuts. And Fred Chrisman and others, right? And others around him were seriously in the middle of everything that was conspiracy related, a little twisted, seemed a little funky in U.S. history, all the way up to the JFK assassination and the Apollo moon flights, by the way, too, as well. Fred Chrisman, crazy story. And that is death by UFO.
And it just gets stranger because, as you can read from this newspaper, the plane crashed. The plane crashed. It was holding this debris, whatever it was.
The original debris. Remember
the original debris, right?
Yeah. So Chrisman and Kenneth Arnold, it's kind of like Jesse Marcel and Roswell, right? When they switched out the parts, right? They're looking and they're like, that ain't what we had. And they never figured out how the boxes got switched or when they got switched. They don't know. And they didn't know. They knew then that the whole thing was a bit funky. Later on, General Ramey, again, tied to Roswell, right? He went on to say, and by the way, when you go and look at the travel itineraries of a few of the names for Majestic 12, MJ12 on that list, you know where they were? They were in Tacoma during Maury Island. Yeah.
No.
So what are you doing? A 4-star general, head of the Air Force, right? Head of the defense. What are you doing in Maury Island during all of this?
Not going on vacation, that's for sure.
Yeah. Weird time. And then you've got Fred Chrisman, right? So was Fred Chrisman befriending Kenneth Arnold and Harold Dahl because he was a CIA troublemaker? That was his job. And he you can go and look at his biography. It's absolutely nuts. This guy, Fred Chrisman. He was an instigator. So did he come in and act like he's his buddy and he's going to take care of this just sort of, and did he do the switcheroo in the box and then steps back with Kenneth Arnold and goes, "Hey man, that's not the original stuff," when he was the one that set it up to begin with? Was he the one that booked Kenneth Arnold's hotel room for him in advance? Kenneth Arnold landed his plane and then pulled into town looking for a hotel. The first hotel he pulls up to, there's already a room booked in his name. Nobody knew his flights. Nobody knew anything about this case. It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. The facts are that debris was on that B-25 Mitchell. Those pilots who conducted the interviews and collected everything crashed and died. The debris that fell from the sky was lost. Allegedly.
So they say, right? I'm gonna share this image here for those that want to know what Fred Chrisman looks like. Not Fred Christmas, but there it is. That's him.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Just kidding. But it might. I mean, it could fit. It could fit.
Show a real picture of Fred Chrisman. Do you have one? It's the
not
same
on me
dude
right now. But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. That's your boy. That's your boy. Fred Chrisman, man. It's one of the craziest. So, and I am one of those. I love a good conspiracy, Christina. I do. And because I like the research, I like looking into it, I like the what if side of it. You know what I don't like is finding out. Yeah, it's, it's finding out that it's true. I don't want to. I don't want to get to that point. I just want the journey. I want. It's fun. It's rewarding and everything. Don't tell me it's true. Right. And so in the case of Fred Chrisman, this is true. The whole thing is one of the craziest rabbit holes you can go down. And I bet you Fred Chrisman's name is in this article if you blow it up. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty crazy. Pretty crazy.
I'm not seeing it. But what I can say is that during this crash, there were 4 people, 2 military officials and 2 pilots. The 2 pilots died while holding potential UFO debris, alien debris. And then as the story goes, the 2 government officials left with parachutes and the box was never found.
Yeah. 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 It's just one of the craziest cases. One of the craziest cases. All, like I said, we got a dog. Harold Dahl. We've got Kenneth Arnold involved in this up to his neck, and Fred Chrisman, and these 2 pilots who were doing the initial investigation. The whole thing, It's truly a case of death by UFO. And
Jimmy, we have time for one more case. What case do you want to cover?
we've got to go with the first U.S. Secretary, of Defense, James Forrestal.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. James Forrestal. And as crazy now, before I get into this, and Cristina, you can pull up his picture. Before we get into this, James Forrestal, like Fred Chrisman, James Forrestal is part of so many movies, so many TV series, video games, and his death officially is unofficial. Don't know. They just found his body. So did Men in Black show up in his hospital room? I'll get to all of that in a second. Toss him out the window. Don't know. Did he jump? Don't know. Was he put in the hospital for his mental illness because he was out of control? And back then, I hate to say it, it's a dark part of the history in the world. Anybody could have somebody hospitalized and put in a mental institution, family member, doctor, police, whatever, and you ain't getting out, right? And that's a crazy part of our history. And here we have the first U.S. Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, in that position. His death, officially ruled as a suicide, occurred at 1:50 a.m., May 22nd, 1949, when his body was discovered on a 3rd floor canopy of the Bethesda Naval Hospital in Maryland. Bethesda Naval Hospital, as most know, that is the Department of Defense hospital in Washington, D.C. That's the best medical care. That's it. That's a military hospital, Department of Defense, the tippity top of everything here in the United States. Over the decades, rumors have persisted that Forrestal knew too much, particularly around UFOs and government secrets, and that his death was no accident, but an orchestrated assassination. He was very outspoken about what some would consider today pretty serious conspiracy theories about who is running the world, what is going on with that, the military-industrial complex, and that the public deserve to know the truth about all of these things, including Roswell. Okay. Now, Forrestal's suicide has always been connected to the truth about aliens and their interactions with humanity, and his medical records remain sealed as part of the cover-up initiated by President Truman. Now, don't you find that interesting? He also had a diary, and that diary is still under seal. Nobody has access to it. Isn't that interesting? In the 1994 television movie Roswell, one of my favorites, by the way, Forrestal is portrayed by Eugene Roche. I've got a connection to Eugene Roche. His son, actor Eamon Roche, was my next door neighbor, Cristina, for 10 years. And we were really good friends. We played golf. We had apartment condos next to each other. I knew his brother, who was also an actor. I knew his then girlfriend and future wife. And Eamon Roche is a pretty big time, was a pretty big time Hollywood actor, and so was the entire family. And so when this movie came out in 1994, his dad is in the movie. Eamon at that time was my neighbor, right? And we talked about this. We talked about his dad, and we talked about Roswell. It's just a weird, right? 6 degrees of separation to all of this. Well, Eugene Roche, playing Forrestal, the role depicted Forrestal as sitting on a commission concerning the Roswell UFO incident and advocating for the eventual release of information to the public. That's the story. It's very deeply rooted in UFO lore and mythology and everything around Forrestal. But for sure, his death and classified diary, in my opinion, are highly suspicious. At the time of his death, he was telling his family, well, I guess if you're mentally ill, you would probably say this, but I feel great. I'm better now. And there was a lot of talk in the circles around Washington, D.C., that he was okay and was getting ready to get released from the hospital. And the next thing you know, he falls out of the 19th story window. And also, I believe, now I don't want to talk about something that isn't a proven fact, but this is what is that you?
No.
What was that?
That was on your side.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, I was on mute.
No.
Yeah.
Dude, don't mess with me.
I would never.
That came from you.
I did not. I was on mute.
What? No. That was somebody like knocking at a door. Right? I'm about to have a heart attack. I'm about to have a friggin' heart attack. That wasn't you?
No. It was not
See,
me.
it was I'm at your front door. Yeah, everybody heard it. What? Oh man. Got goosebumps. That was crazy. That was crazy. As I was saying, his death and classified diary, to me, in my opinion, are highly suspicious. And when I said that, that's when the knocking started. So I thought you were doing a dun 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 on me, and you
That
weren't.
wasn't me.
That was a special effect. That was too perfect.
It was not me.
I want everybody to go back and watch and see if Christina's arms are moving. I was sitting right here with my hands on my lap. I have nothing to knock on. That's me pounding. That's not what I heard. That was loud. This is my desk.
What?
Man, my desk has a pad on it. It's real thick. It's padded. I don't have any wood in here. Wow. That was, that was pretty nuts. That was fun. That was weird.
That's what happens when you do live shows. There's no going back from it.
I swear I almost had a heart
No
attack.
cuts, no edits.
When you said that wasn't you, I mean, I heard it in my headphones. So it came from, it came from somewhere.
It wasn't me.
No, my
Look,
place is quiet.
even Chris has my back here. Says, Jimmy, I was watching. Cristina never moved.
Okay, but what about me? What about me? Did I move? No. And it sounded wooden. It sounded like a door. And my door's open. There's nothing to knock on here. That was church has gone nuts. Yeah. Well, what would you do?
Maybe someone's messing with the feet. You know what? Maybe it's Fred Chrisman.
Yeah, Fred Chrisman back from the grave. Is that Fred? That's Forrestal right there. Forrestal. Yes. I mean, what do you make of the whole Forrestal situation?
Truly, it's a very difficult subject to cover, just because there's so much laced in it, and you are dealing with a suicide here. Have it be either he did it or he had help doing it. We don't know, but what we are aware of is that he did keep a journal or a diary, however you want to phrase it. And he did have his fingers deep in a lot of government secrets. And then we can assume here that he was very knowledgeable when it came to UFOs and all, maybe even the research that was taking place there with crash retrievals or abductions, or sightings, encounters, and all of this. And when you have too much knowledge, you become a little bit too powerful. It comes from the saying, with knowledge comes power, right? Could that have happened to him? Or is it all merely a coincidence? When we're dealing with hospitals, psychiatric wards, suicides, the military, and the government, that's where a lot of conspiracies arise. A lot of rumors take place as well. And it gets very, very difficult to properly research and understand, just because it's tough. And then you bring in the connection to MJ12, right? Majestic 12 as well, with him, with Forrestal. It just becomes an absolute can of worms. And right now, because his diary or journal hasn't been released, it's still deeply under wraps. It's AKA classified. Mm-hmm. We don't know what's going on. But this is one of several suicides that have taken place with those that have knowledge with UFOs.
Yeah, for sure. And, if you're president, and in this case, President Truman, and you've got the first Secretary of Defense, remember in 1947, they consolidated everything in the Pentagon, and the Pentagon was being finished. And moving the entire War Department, which was spread across the United States, and part of it was in California and Sacramento and so forth. That the first Secretary of Defense was a very important position. And you need to make sure, as president, and like I said, in this case, President Truman, that this guy is in control and that he's on message. And it's a very important position, one of the most important positions in the world at that time. They just came out of World War II. And the UFO and the flying saucer situation was getting grips on this country. And it was crazy times. And then with the military industrial complex and the talks of secret organizations and what was going on in the world at that time, Forrestal was very vocal about this. And Truman, again, about flying saucers and ET and everything else, Truman really felt like the guy that he had picked, here he is right here, to be the first Secretary of Defense, that he couldn't be trusted with these very paramount secrets. And the next thing you know, he ends up in this hospital, in a mental ward. Think about everything that happened to him while he was there. And it wasn't just once. It happened a couple of times. And then the next thing you know, what I was going to say, before the knocking started. Better not do it again. That why was he like in the only room that didn't like have bars on the window? Right? Again, I don't want to be too much of a conspiracy theorist or speaking untruth, but it's my understanding that at that height, those windows were protected. Why in a mental ward, somebody in a mental situation at a hospital that's being checked for mental capacity and illness is in a 19th floor room without bars or security on the window that you can just jump out of? That doesn't make any sense, does it? Now, the story is that every other room on that floor was protected, the mental patients and the people that were there, but not his? Right? Or were they removed? I don't know. Is that Colonel Corso?
Or it doesn't look like it. I just thought that the image just looked weird.
Fred Chrisman. It's Fred Chrisman.
It's Fred Chrisman. Knocking on your doors and taking your shoes.
Cristina, what a fantastic show. Perfect show. Yeah, that guy does look strange.
Right? Just like in the background, he just looks oddly creepy in this image.
Kind of looks like a vampire. Yeah. Yeah, he does. Nosferatu. There you go. Cristina, thank you so much. I'll see everybody tonight on Fade to Black. Eben Alexander is with us, neurosurgeon. Of course, he wrote the New York Times #1 best-selling book, Proof of Heaven. Extremely accomplished medical professional who had a near-death experience. And we're going to be talking about all of that tonight with Eben. I'm very excited. So I'll see everybody tonight. Until then, Cristina, have a great day and go Beckley Tepe, everybody.
Go Beckley Tepe. Thank you for everyone who's able to catch this show live or even on replay. If you haven't subscribed, do so now and hit that like button as well. Tomorrow is going to be strangest news of the week. You don't want to miss it. It's always a lot of fun. And then I got some other cool stuff planned because as I had mentioned at the beginning of this show is alluding to a future one. And let me tell you, putting a lot of work behind that. And I think you're really going to like it. That is it for today. I will see you tomorrow. Be safe. And remember, keep your eyes on the skies. If you enjoy the strange and the mysterious, UFOs, the paranormal, and cryptids, this channel is for you. So make sure to subscribe as I do 3 videos right here every single week and hit that notification bell so you do not miss any of the bonus content I post right here.